Vladimir Putin delivered the shortest New Year's address since the start of the full-scale war and briefly expressed his support for the special military operation fighters. Putin also stated that Russia has a future ahead worth fighting for, although he didn't specify what that future would look like. And with that, the address ended. But something more important appeared: a map of drone flights and footage of a downed Ukrainian drone. 2 days later, the Russian Ministry of Defense finally showed evidence of the Ukrainian attack on Putin's residence in Valdai. The evidence looks strange, but Putin didn't aim to convince anyone that the attack actually happened. His goal was to disrupt peace talks on Ukraine. And the day before, the head of the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Sergei Lavrov, finally revealed the Kremlin's entire plan. Lavrov publicly stated that Russia is against providing security guarantees for Ukraine from the United States and NATO. After all, the Kremlin did not expect that Trump would actually go for it. And ironclad guarantees ruin Putin's plans to invade Ukraine again in a few years. In this episode, we'll discuss more than just that. Last night, Ukraine attacked the port and oil refinery in Tuapse with drones, while Russia attacked residential buildings in Odessa and Belarus that same night. This says a lot about the real goals in this war. My name is Pechiy. Let's discuss this topic together, but before we start, I ask you to subscribe to this channel, give it a like, and don't forget to leave your comment. Also, subscribe to my Telegram channel, Pechiy News. The link to it is in the description of this video. There we publish breaking news as it comes in. So, on this map, you can see evidence that the drone was flying directly toward Vladimir Putin's residence in the Novgorod region. Here are all the drones, even those that were shot down in the Bryansk and Smolensk regions. Well, I don't know. If the Russians have learned to calculate the flight trajectory and even the future target of a drone, then that's a real breakthrough in warfare, because no one today can fully predict exactly where a drone is headed, except for the operator of that drone. Of course, yes, friends. 2 days later, the Russian Ministry of Defense reported a Ukrainian drone attack on Vladimir Putin's residence in the Novgorod region. And to prove it, they showed this map. During the briefing, the chief of the anti-aircraft missile forces of the Russian Aerospace Forces, Major General Alexander Romanenkov, noted that information about the planned raid became known on December 28 at around 1920 Moscow time, and the attack itself took place on the night of the 29th. The drones were launched from the Sumy and Chernihiv regions of Ukraine and were flying directly toward the residence of the President of the Russian Federation from the direction of the Bryansk, Smolensk, Tver and Novgorod regions. The attack was targeted, carefully planned, and carried out in several waves. Go on. He added that in total, air defense forces shot down 91 drones, 50 of which were over the Bryansk and Smolensk regions. The Ministry of Defense also released a video of one of the downed drones, and in the footage you can see the body of some black drone lying in an unknown forest area. It's not known where the video was filmed. Well, just take a look at this video yourself, it's very telling.
As a result of analyzing the downing of Ukrainian drones, one of the modifications of Chiklun V was discovered. The warhead of this drone is a high explosive charge weighing 6 kilograms. This high explosive part is filled with a large number of striking elements and was intended to target personnel and civilian objects. Because it was hit in the tail section, this drone remained intact. This is a rare and unique case when we have an unexploded warhead filled with high explosive elements. 26 key.
But what the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation did next shocked me, because they were so poorly prepared that they just slapped the evidence together on the fly. Remember how yesterday Russian journalists went to Valdai, interviewed the local residents, and they said that on that night there wasn't even an air raid alert announced in the region, and accordingly none of the locals heard any air defense activity. And so the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation decided to outplay everyone, and posted a video with an alleged resident of the village of Roshchino, which is located near Putin's residence in Valdai. And according to this resident, on the night of December 29th, he personally heard a loud noise coming from the direction of Lake Valdaiskoye. Putin's residence is located just beyond that lake. But in fact, this unknown man for some reason talked about rockets but didn't say anything about the distinctive sounds of drones.
I woke up early, everything shook from the noise. To be honest, at first you didn't understand, maybe some dump trucks were working somewhere or something, but then it quickly hit you when you got up that it was the sound of rockets. For the first time in my life I saw and heard such a screech coming from the direction of the lake. I heard it, yes, because Lake Valdai is right there. I live on the other side, so it was very far away, but from their side, of course, yes.
Let me remind you, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov was the first to report the Ukrainian drone attack on Putin's Valdai residence on December 29. He stressed that after this, Russia will shift its stance in talks on Ukraine. After that, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky called the claim about the attack a fake. And, according to him, Moscow is thus preparing the ground for strikes on government buildings in Kiev and wants to undermine progress in the peace talks between Ukraine and the United States. Justifying its refusal to end the war, the Kremlin called the attack on the residence a terrorist act, which was aimed not only against Putin but also against United States President Donald Trump, and to disrupt the peace talks. At the same time, the Kremlin refused to present any evidence of the drone raid, noting that, as Peskov said, this is more a matter for our military. Well, the Russian military did show the downed drone. The video's filming location is unknown, and they also showed a map claiming, "Look, we drew this, see where the attack was planned from." Apparently, after Lukashenko recently hit his head on the ice during hockey, he forgot he'd already discussed certain directions and gave Putin a hint about what to say. So, listen, just draw a map, that's it. But this episode was needed by the Russians to disrupt the negotiations. But it's not just that Ukraine and the United States were on the verge of reaching a security guarantees agreement for at least 15 years. Which would repeat the same provisions as Article 5 of the NATO Charter. Trump also agreed to submit these guarantees for United States Congress ratification. Well, such a scenario doesn't fit into the Kremlin's logic, so they simply decided to disrupt these guarantees. And yesterday, Sergei Lavrov came out and stated, I'll quote him, "To those in the European Union and NATO who are loudly demanding ironclad security guarantees for Ukraine, within the Russia and United States-led settlement process, it would be good to answer the question of what kind of regime they are trying so hard to protect and for what purpose." The question is rhetorical. There is no doubt that the main goal of Brussels, Berlin, Paris and London is to preserve a regime that dreams of being helped to survive and to continue controlling some territory where, contrary to all norms of international law, the Russian language and Russian language media are legally banned, and where canonical orthodoxy is persecuted. That's what he means. The Russian Orthodox Church, monuments of Russian history and culture, Nazi ideology and practices are being cultivated, and opposition members and simply those who disagree are subjected to brutal repression. It is precisely such an entity next to Russia that European Russophobes need in order to implement their announced plans to prepare a new aggression against our country. Whew, that was the entire statement from Sergei Lavrov, and from this statement by Lavrov, it finally became clear what the goal of the Russian information operation with the alleged strike on Putin's residence in Valdai was. It is the disruption of the emerging ironclad security guarantees for Ukraine and the cultivation of the idea that it is Europe preparing for war against Russia, not the other way around. It seems, first in Berlin and then at Trump's Mar-a-Lago residence, Ukraine was offered a truly strong package of guarantees that Russia could never accept, because then it really would never be able to attack Ukraine again. But Putin simply couldn't refuse. Otherwise, he would look like someone who can't make agreements, so he needed some kind of pretext to toughen the conditions for Ukraine. For this purpose, they made up this story about an alleged attack on Putin's residence. And here, Putin gets a reason not to accept the conditions agreed upon in Mar-a-Lago, while Trump can continue to play at negotiations. Because Russia reportedly hasn't left them. But they can't impose sanctions against Russia either, because supposedly Ukraine is to blame since they shouldn't have attacked Putin's residence and so on. But to understand the real goals in this war, I'll give just 2 episodes from last night, episode 1. On the night of December 31st, Ukraine attacks Tuapse, which is in the Krasnodar region. As a result, one of the piers at the Black Sea port of Tuapse and equipment at the oil refinery were damaged. I should note that the port of Tuapse mainly exports petroleum products from the Tuapse oil refinery, as well as fuel from the Samara group of Rosneft refineries. So, Ukraine is depriving Russia of this ability to earn money to continue the war? Episode 2. That same night, at the same time, Russian forces attacked Odessa with strike drones. 4 multi-story residential buildings in 2 districts of Odessa were hit, and the energy infrastructure was also struck. That same night, the Russians struck the city of Bila Tserkva in the Kyiv region, damaging 2 multi-story residential buildings. That's the whole difference between the goals in this war. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Friends, I want to wish you all a happy new year, and if you found this episode useful and interesting, you can support the work of this YouTube channel with your donation or a paid sponsorship subscription using the links and details provided. In the description of this video, it says support the channel Alexei Pechiy. Choose any format that is convenient for you. I appreciate any support from you. That's all for now. Take care and goodbye.